The first settlers in the heavily wooded Kokato area arrived in 1856, settling just south of Sucker Creek. The arrival of the railroad and the building of a depot in 1869 spurred the growth of the settlement, bringing in droves of settlers, including European immigrants primarily from Sweden and Finland, looking to build their homes and farm the land. As the population grew to over 250 residents, stores, a school, hotels, barns, blacksmith shops, and flour mills filled up downtown Cokato. In March of 1878, the residents voted to incorporate, and the village of Kokato, named after the Dakota Native American word meaning in the midst of, was born. The need for fire protection in those days was obvious. Buildings and sidewalks were made of wood. Some buildings had a brick exterior wall covering a wood frame structure. Many businesses and homes used wood or coal-fired stoves for heat. Candles and oil lamps were used for light. To help combat fires, the village placed water cisterns at the intersections of streets throughout downtown. These underground tanks would hold about over 12,000 gallons, about 400 barrels of water. The cisterns were about 15 by 15 by 8 feet. To best utilize the cisterns, the village of Kokato in 1888 ordered a horse-drawn firefighting rig with equipment to pump water from the village well to fill the cisterns and fight the fires. Along with a hand pump, hose reels like this one help firefighters to spray water from the cisterns onto the flames. But all too often, these cisterns, hand pumps, hoses, and citizens' bucket brigades were not enough to fight the flames. In fact, fires were common, and two large fires in 1883 and 1894 burned down large portions of the business community. These events spurred the need for a formalized fire department. On April 27, 1896, a group of men met for the sole purpose of forming a fire department for Kokato. 12 men were elected members of the Kokato Fire Company. Their names included Charles Larson, Charles Carlson, A.P. Peterson, J.A. Eklund, J.W. Larson, Nels Olson, O.N. Sandstrom, W.W. Frank, Peter Brandt, William Reed, John Hendrickson, and Frank Swanson. In addition to the 12 members, John Tracy was elected as Kokato's first fire chief and Axel Hammerstein as the first assistant fire chief. On May 11, 1898, the Kokato Fire Company's numbers increased to 24, now including Theodore Almquist, O.J. Mabeth, Andrew Lodine, Louis Johnson, Menser Johnson, C.J. Carlson, H.P. Peterson, Henry Taylor, Frank Johnson, and George Lee. These men were Kokato's first official firefighters, local businessmen and farmers who volunteered to serve, battling fires with limited training and learning primarily on the job. A constitution and bylaws were established by the Kokato Fire Company in 1896, along with a code of signals to bring the firefighters together. According to the department meeting minutes, signals included, quote, several taps of the bell repeated to a call to a meeting at the hall. Several taps repeated 5 times to call members to the engine house for a practice or to fight a fire. Within the next few years, the department was outfitted with 34-foot and 28-foot ladders, 2 logging chains, hose couplings for repairs, 4 rubber coats and hats, 2 pairs of gloves, and fire hooks. The city also had a garage built behind the city hall for the hand pumper, firefighting rig, and constructed a storage tank with a windmill that pumped 400 barrels, about 12,000 gallons of water into the tank. With limited equipment to protect them and no breathing apparatus, these early firefighters were true smoke eaters. In 1930, The first motorized fire truck was purchased. The truck was a pumper, which could either carry or suck in water from an outside source, like a lake or a fire hydrant. The equipment was incredibly helpful for the rural fires or in areas of town that did not have ready access to water. Around 1939, the new Kokato City Hall was built. By this time, the city of Kokato had fire hydrants and a city water system instead of cisterns. The city also built a more substantial metal water tower in 1921. Like its wood processor, it held 50,000 gallons of water. The new city hall incorporated the Kokato Fire Department, including a garage for their equipment and vehicles. Throughout the years, the city fire department fought fires both in town and out in the country. Rural firefighting has its challenges. Water had to be brought to the scene in trucks or pumped from the nearest lake, river, or well. Even today, firefighters in Kokato have very different experiences than firefighters in large cities. During the 1940s and 50s, the Kokato Fire Department became involved in Fire Prevention Week. Buildings were inspected, and volunteers visited all of the local and rural schools. All in all, Fire Prevention Week is one of the many additional things the Kokato Fire Department has done to help serve and keep the community safe. As Kokato moved into the early 1950s and 60s, trucks and equipment started becoming more sophisticated and larger. Soon, the fire department outgrew the city garage, and some of the fire trucks had to be parked out in the open near the water tower behind City Hall. Recognizing the need for a bigger space, in 1967, the city of Kokato built a new fire hall on 3rd Street and Jenks Avenue. The building provided, for a time, ample space for the larger engines and gear. Over the years, the Kokato Fire Department has fought numerous fires and disasters. On June 8, 1977, at 2:30 in the morning, the Kokato Fire Department responded to what is considered one of the worst and most tragic fires in Kokato history, the Kokato Hotel Fire. The Kokato Hotel was on the corner of Broadway and 2nd, near the railroad tracks. There were 16 residents in the hotel that night. The Kokato Fire Department responded quickly to the call, worked valiantly to save the residents and control the fire. Unfortunately, 5 lives were lost. It is a day those brave firemen will never forget. Firemen Dennis Johnson and Reed Carlson were on the scene that day. Fires are not the only calls the Kokato Fire Department responds to. They also respond to natural disasters like the Kokato tornado. On June 16, 1992 at 11:15 p.m., the city of Kokato was struck by tornadic winds that caused a lot of damage throughout the community, but thankfully, there were no deaths. Throughout the night and the following week, Kokato's firefighters worked over 957 hours to help the community get back on its feet. The firefighters who were there remember it well. In 1996, the Kokato Fire Department celebrated its 100th anniversary. Today, only 25 years later from its centennial, the department has seen some major changes, including increasing member numbers from 24 to 30 firefighters. These including adding women to their ranks in 2004. Technology has also changed much about firefighting. Changes in the size of trucks and the amount of gear needed to keep firefighters in the community safe are one of the main reasons why a new fire hall was needed. In 2015, the city and fire department began discussing the need for a new fire hall. A referendum was passed in 2016 to begin building the fire hall, leading to the groundbreaking ceremonies in 2017. Construction began, and by August 2018, the fire department held its open house. The new facility sets up Kokato for future growth and gives the Kokato Fire Department room to better function, train, and serve the community. 125 years later, the only thing that hasn't changed is the firefighters' dedication to protect the lives and property of everyone in this community.
I've been serving the Kokato Fire Department since 2006. I always had that need to serve, but I was also looking for a unity of brotherhood, if you will.
I joined, well, my uncle was on the fire department for a long time, and that kind of got me interested, and it just sounded fun, like something that I'd like to do. I like to help people, so it works.
I've been a firefighter since 1976, so it'd be 43 years, working on 44 years right now. And I don't have any intention of retiring yet, unless they say I'm too old and too slow and not too fat yet, but they kick me off and I'll say no, and I'll just say never.
I've always wanted to be on the fire department, as long as I can remember, and just finally got the nudge and just went ahead with it.
I was with the fire department in March of 2016, and I just have always had the interest for fire. I was a friendly fire explorer back in my early teens to 19, and I really enjoyed it. And then I met my husband Jimmy through the fire explorers, and then I was brought to Kokato because of him, and it was just the timing of my life that it was the right time for me to join the fire department.
I believe I got on in December of '82 or '83. I can't remember the exact year. And I just thought it was an opportunity. I had gotten married in October, and we knew we were going to live here. And I've always been involved with the community, so I just thought it was another way to be and stay involved.
My name is Reed Carlson. I lived in Cokato since 1970. I became a member on the Kokato Fire Department December 1971. And right now I'm on my 50th year on the Kokato Fire Department. I was fire chief for 10 years. Previously, before that, I was captain for 5 years. Back then, but the only training you had was put the wet stuff on the red stuff.
So different than what we had when I first got on. We did a simple application, and no testing or anything like we currently do. And then with all the Firefighter 1 and 2, I did go through Firefighter, I believe at that time it was A and B, if I remember right, but not near the extensive training that is done now.
When I joined, there was just local training that was done. You would be approved by the city council, and then you just did training within the fire department, and they slowly trained you into the point where you would be able to put on an air pack and go into a fire. And that took a number of months of training. There was no official state training at that, certification at that time.
Regular firefighter, 18 years old, live in the area, work in the area is even better, and then there's an interview process. Interview to become a firefighter, we have obviously the application through the city, because you are a city employee. So they collect the applications. We have always interviewed everybody that applies, because we don't get that many. When we ask, we get a couple, 3 or so a year. So we interview everybody that applies. We do a skills test, and the skills test is just to not only for us to evaluate the person, but also so the person realizes what they're going to be asked to do, or see if they have any fears, or see if it's kind of, obviously in the half-hour skills test, they can't decide if it's really for them, but it gives them a taste of what it's all about. And then they have an interview with the officers. Once that is complete, then you need to do your Firefighter 1 and 2, which is about 150 hours. They usually do it right around the beginning of the year, and you have to take that and pass that. But you are on while you're taking that.
We probably had over 20 chimney fires a year, and now they probably have 0. So that is one thing that has changed big time. And I think there's why that is. Well, I think less people burn, for one thing. I know less people rely on wood, where they just continue to stoke the fire and build up the creosote. They may be burning, but they're starting a fire in the morning, and then when they get home after work, so they're getting a good draft, that type of thing.
You know, just the construction has changed, some for the better, some for the worse, and materials have changed huge. You know, everybody puts all their storage stuff in plastic totes. Well, you get a pile of plastic totes with stuff in it burning, it's like a gas fire. I mean, it's oil. It's what that rubber or that plastic is. And even the houses, you know, they have fire stops in the walls, and they have, you know, more of that stuff now. But the framing itself is, you know, plywood and lightweight trusses, and so it doesn't hold up to the fire like it used to either, though. And vinyl siding compared to having, you know, a stucco house or even a wood, you know, sided house is huge. I mean, vinyl is plastic; it burns very well. So I mean, there's definitely has changed over the years, or you can see the difference just in the houses here in town. If we get a house fire, we had one up on 4th Street. It was a stucco house, and that thing was going when we got there, and they ended up fixing it up because it was the old style, the old, you know, heavy duty lumber stucco house, and they definitely held up better compared to what they do now with the lightweight construction. And usually if there's a fire in a house, they tear it down.
The technology with the trucks, you know, people have no idea what these trucks can do. You know, with the amount of gallons that you can pump out of a truck in a very, very short period of time. Now, again, like I said, with the ladder trucks, just the efficiency. The cameras that we have, the infrared cameras, being able to go into a house and identify hot spots. We use it on propane, the anhydrous tanks, you know, at Centra Soda. James Babb a few years ago just tried it for fun, and that infrared camera showed exactly where the leak was.
When I first got on, like I said before, it was put the wet stuff on the red stuff, surround and drown. Right now, with all the training that we've had and with the great air packs that we've gotten, and the Nomax hoods and the Nomax coats and the bunker pants and boots, so we don't have to worry about nails, stepping on nails. I mean, we go in there and attack the fire, and a lot of times with our radios, we can get a window or a wall or a roof open, and we can push the fire out. We can push the smoke out. Like if you have a fire in one room and you open up the door and you just put the water on there, you can push that fire all the way through the house. So right now it's more of a science. We find out where the fire is, we get behind it, and we'll push it out, push the heat, the smoke out, because a lot of times the water and the smoke do as much damage as the fire does. And all that is the training that we're doing. We practice, we try to find houses that we practice on that will do different scenarios. We'll hide people or dummies in there, and we'll go there and we'll attack it like a regular house fire. Okay, the fire's here. Let's not push it through the house. Let's get around the backside, but we have to do rescue at the same time. You know, find the people, and we don't want to push the smoke and the fire into them.
Don't overthink it. You got to put water on fire. Of all the things you learn, and you learn about how much water turns into steam, and you learn about pressures, and you got to put the water on the fire. You're not going to put the fire out. When you're looking for an address, look up. You might see the smoke. You know, don't bury your face in the map. Don't overthink it. Just do what you need to do and get the job done.
You know, each year the gear has improved. Your air packs have gotten lighter. The technology with your bunkers, your coats, you know, it's amazing the heat resistance that they can handle. And if you look at our small town and the equipment we have, and what I talk about mainly with equipment is the trucks. Not only the number of trucks we have, but the technology behind the trucks nowadays is pretty amazing. And for a small town, we've been very fortunate.
We've definitely learned fire science a little better, so we know how thermal expansion works with water, so we know how to steam it out versus just dump a ton of water on it. We just different tactics of that nature, how we work together as a crew, like we communicate, radios help a lot. We could tell firefighters we're gonna be venting out a window so no one gets glass dropped on them, you know, and that's a huge advantage of the fact that we have radios where we can talk back and forth, wherefore in the older days, they just is what it was. If you see glass falling, they must be trying to ventilate a window, so.
As far as interior firefighting, the heat imaging cameras made quite a difference in that I remember specifically one time where there was a room really full of smoke, but we felt we'd knocked the fire down, but I couldn't figure out where the window was to open a window and start ventilating. And the guy with the camera just watched me as I crawled across the floor and was able to open a window. And he directed me because he had a camera and he could see through the smoke. It was heat that he saw, and so that was a big thing as far as a change in firefighting.
The trickiest fires, I'm gonna go ahead and say basement fires. Basement fires to me are a little trickier than most of the other ones. A lot of because heat rises and then it starts to layer, and we call it thermal layering. Well, if the door's shut to the basement, it's layering, so the hottest part about the fire is up. So if you were to open the door without taking any preventive measures or anything, you've just opened the door to 1,200 degrees, 1,500 degrees, and that's way hot, way uncomfortable, and not very pleasant to be in. And so the tricky part is trying to bust up the thermal layering before you go down in there, before you open it wide open, and then you got to crawl through it and then go down into the basement to figure out what's actually burning. You know, so there's a lot of steps you got to take, precautions, forethought, to what's going to happen, because it's not like on a main level or a second level, you can't just bail out a window. If you get in trouble, you're actually underground.
Well, it would probably be the big fires that most people always talk about, the hotel fire, the big wind that we had. It's still a controversy if it was a tornado or a big wind, but there was quite a bit of damage there. We've had our barn fires, some pretty tragic accidents, car accidents, which, can make you, especially when the young people or kids are involved, agricultural accidents. But you get used to it. You guys talk about it, and we just let her go. Middle of the night, got a late call. Lyle Severson was chief at the time. Had a few of the guys go in, start doing rescue, get the people out of there. Jim Erickson was one of the first guys in with an air pack, and he couldn't even, the steps were gone. That's how far burnt it was. He was not able to get up on the second floor. So then it was all ladder work, getting in the windows, and search for a few victims. And it was a tough fire. For me, personally, my wife was gone on a trip with her folks. I had some little kids at home. My daughter had just turned 16, just got her driver's license. And we were outside, and we watched a front tree go down, and we grabbed everybody, went downstairs. He says, I gotta go to the fire barn, you're in charge. And I had a hard time getting my pickup going over people's yards because the streets are all cluttered with trees and to get to the fire barn. And then I got word to her to load up all the food out of the freezer and haul it someplace because we're gonna be out of power for a few days. And when I came home, our yard was cleaned up. The neighbors had came and cleaned up our yard and some of the trees that we left, cleared out on the street. And National Guard, which the sheriff had called, came with big trucks and hauled stuff away for us.
Corn bin fire.
A grain bin.
Grain bin fires.
Grain bin fires.
Grain bin fires.
Went for about 9 hours, I think, and I didn't get there until like 5 o'clock, so it was about 4.5 hours in, and it was pretty intense. It was, fire that was underneath a pile of corn, and our job was really just to suck the corn out and try to salvage what we could, and it was pretty hot.
Where we've dumped water on it for hours, and it still don't go out because it's just you can't penetrate into where the fire is. So I would say that's one of the trickiest ones.
Just physically big swamp fires, grass fires were a lot of work. In carrying maybe a pack with water and putting it out as you went, but any structure that was really hot and really dark was difficult just because you were trying to figure out where you were. Was the floor burned through? Was the ceiling bad? Basement fires were always difficult because you go through a layer of heat to go into the basement. Heat always rises, obviously, and is hottest at the ceiling. And to go into a basement, you were essentially going through that layer of heat. So those were, and your escapes, your exits out of a basement are always somewhat limited.
They're all dangerous. There's some probably more dangerous, yeah. Anything's got more explosive in it, sometimes some garages have, you got gasoline, kerosene, acetylene tanks, stuff like that. They get overheated, they can, kaboom, okay. They set the things off, they go, big LP tanks. You don't want to be around those if they go, because they'll shoot for miles and the heat is quite a while. So you gotta make sure you gotta keep a lot of water on them so they don't heat up if there's fire on them. They're pretty dangerous. Yeah.
A few years ago, we changed things up a little bit, and the first responding officer, whether it's the chief or the assistant chief or the captain, will get into one of the grass rigs and get to the fire so they can kind of size up the situation, and then he can radio over where he wants the engine parked, what side of the house needs to be attacked first, where the fire might be. He'll size up, even though he might only be there 30, 45 seconds before that first truck.
It's a team effort. The input from all people is very critical. Everybody sees something different, but hopefully now, with the radios that we have, the communication is that much more, how do I say it? It's that much better, simple as that. We've gotten much better with a person that, and I'm drawing a blank on what I want to call him, but just, like if you have a structure fire, making sure you understand how many guys you got in the house. So we have a board that if you're going in, you're taking your name tag. So and that is, we never did that when I first got on. That wasn't even thought about. So just those type of things, each year as you progress and those things get more efficient. And you really need to know where your guys are. So, yeah.
Fire chief is appointed by the city. They take recommendations from the fire department, and then it's approved by the city council. I started as lieutenant, and then I was lieutenant for a few years, and then I was assistant chief for a year, and then I was chief. So I moved up quite quick through the ranks, but you know, I kind of had a taste all the way up, and that's how I ended up in the role. The assistant chief is obviously backup for me, and it's also, you know, kind of really helps run fire scenes and things like that. They oversee, you know, some of the different needs of the fire department as far as equipment and that kind of stuff. And then captain is in charge of equipment and trucks and turnout gear, air packs, that kind of stuff. First lieutenant does training. They're in charge of training. Second lieutenant assists in training and is in charge of the checking of air packs, because it's a huge deal for our air packs. And then we have a safety officer that is oversees the safety part of it at a scene or at a training or stuff like that.
Well, there's many kinds of calls that we respond to. If you're talking a structure fire, if it's a house or a barn, or we respond to the station. You get your gear on. There's a sheet on the wall on what kind of fire, what truck needs to go out first, depending on if it's a car accident or a structure fire. You know, different trucks go first. On a structure fire, we get the pumper, the engine. Pumper's an old term. We get the engine rolling first, and the person that drives the engine is the one that's going to be running the pump controls and getting the water moving. And then your guys in the back will get packed up, and then we'll get figure out who's going to be on the nozzle, and the hoses on the truck are ready to go, and we pull them into the fire and start spraying water. There's more to it than that, but yeah, you get the truck there and get the wet stuff on the red stuff.
You know, a fire on a 40-degree day is pretty nice. You know, a fire when it's 90 out and everybody's exhausted and hot and getting overheated, and just the opposite. If you have a fire when it's, you know, 0, you have a lot of, you know, people sitting in trucks to warm up, water freezing, people freezing. So it's definitely perfect fire would probably be on a 40-degree no-wind day.
The ones at 3 o'clock in the morning when it's 30 below aren't as much fun as the ones in the afternoon when it's 70 out, you know. Yeah, you just, sometimes you can barely move. Coats are so full of ice. It just goes with the territory. You know, you put up with the heat, put up with the cold. It's our job, no problem. We just do it. One thing in winter fires, we got to be more concerned about the trucks freezing up. The water, you know, you use if you put a fire hose down and don't have the water flowing out of it, next time you grab it, it's a, 50-foot long 2x4. It doesn't bend, won't do anything, it's froze solid right at the connections.
Winter fires are definitely challenging. I had my experience with Howard Lake on a couple very cold nights, Christmas morning, early morning, and then there was another one where, if I remember right, it was like 40-degree below weather, and the wind was just ridiculous. Your regulator freezes up, but you also still got to remember hydration because you are still sweating. But there's those challenges where your equipment is freezing up. Everything's freezing up on you when it's cold. The summer, then you have to worry about heat exhaustion and staying hydrated.
How many calls we have that aren't calls, that aren't fire calls? The false alarms and not everybody realizes we go to medicals. We do weather watches when there's severe weather. We come up here and send out a couple of trucks, and the rest of us stay here and we're on the ready. And I don't know if a lot of people realize how many times we come up here for a fire alarm that turns out to be nothing, but we have to respond. We don't know it's nothing until we know it's nothing, so we still have to respond.
For a typical call, or let's say a structure fire, we, myself and my assistant chief, there's one pickup that we use as a command vehicle. We take that first, It's just, it's quicker to get out the door. We don't wait for everybody to get in it. And that way we can get there a little bit earlier and just kind of do a little bit of a 360, a little bit of scenario of what are the resources we might need, or where they might have to set up, or, different hazards or different equipment might need coming. So for fires, that's kind of what we do. And for medicals and lift assists, if it's a lift assist and we're helping the ambulance and stuff like that, a lot of times we'll just drive our personal vehicles to the scene, especially when it's right here in town. And so every call is a little bit different. We do have a SOP for if this is the call, these are the pieces of equipment that leave first, and once these pieces are gone, you call whoever's the commanding officer to see if they need anything else. And so we do have a protocol, you might call it, of the different calls that we might get on what apparatus need to respond.
I think a lot of things that civilians probably don't know is how much time it takes to be a firefighter. They might see fire trucks whistling down the road, here and there, but if the calls come in at midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 in the morning, and they only see us coming back at 8, 9 o'clock, they don't realize that we've been up serving them for the last 7 or 8 hours. And I think most civilians who have never experienced or even needed emergency services probably don't truly understand the amount of time that most of the firefighters actually give.
There's a lot of people that think we live here or that we're a full-time department. There's a lot of people that don't realize that when the pager goes off, we're either at work or at home or somewhere in between. That's one thing that I shouldn't say a lot, but there's a lot of people that don't realize that this is not staffed.
I think people have to realize that firefighters do make a sacrifice in doing what they do, in family time, in birthday parties that you're driving away from, in family gatherings that you're driving away from, the middle of a church service that you're driving away from, which was always nice. They always prayed for us as we left, and I appreciated that. And the toll that it does take on firefighters, because you see everything, and as you drive around, you remember things, and you remember good things, like we put that house out. It's still standing because we put that house out. But you also remember the bad things. And so just so people, I don't know what they could expect them to do with that, but just so they understand, it takes a toll to be a firefighter.
On the hotel fire, I've just got on in, 76, and the hotel fire was in 78, so at the time, didn't have a lot of training, but had, some training in the years before, and we got the call at like 2, 3 in the morning, that the hotel was on fire. And we had to start rescue right away because there's people inside. So the first thing I did, I got a couple of us to get a ladder off the truck. We put it up to the second story on the north side of the building because it was the west part was a 2 or 3 story building, I believe, and it was a longer toward the east side was just a 1 story, I believe. That's a long time ago, so it might be off a little bit there. So, but on the west side, on the north side of the building, we put ladders up to the second floor, I believe it was. And actually the guy coming out the window. And this was a heavy man. And when they come out the window, they just, they're in a hurry, so they came out full bore, and I had all his weight sitting on top of me, standing on top of the ladder. We're lucky we had 2 out. We had another guy help me. We got him down. Yeah, actually one person, now he jumped out. I believe it was the 3rd story. He jumped out into the pine trees. Yeah, and I checked the window next door, and that was real dark, and there was no way it would be able to save him. anybody in there. I don't believe there was somebody in there, so. Yeah, that was quite tragic for the town, this one, because there was a couple, 2 or 3, I don't remember exactly, 2 or 3 deaths in there. Anyway, at one point, we got to a point where they were missing somebody. We couldn't find, so we did a rescue, and then you do overhaul, or you find the people that didn't make it, and you're looking for somebody. So now we spent a lot of time looking for somebody that they thought was there, but it turned out that he was out of town. So instead of starting putting a lot of the fire out, we were busy looking for somebody. But it wouldn't have made any difference once it got up and started going.
It's when you go into a fire building, there's some things that are different and some things that are always going to change. A lot of times you can't see where you're going, so you're literally crawling, feeling your way along. Sometimes you just have to stop and listen because you can't see, or you can't, if you're not seeing flame, you just stop and listen for a moment, and you listen for the fire.
People are running out of the building, we're running in, trying to save their property. First of all, our number one is saving lives, other than property, that's secondary. But the very first person you have to save is yourself. Because if you don't save ourselves individually, we can't help anybody else.
So some fires that we experience versus, let's say a career firefighter would in Minneapolis, St. Paul, is we have grass fires. They don't have enough property to have a running grass fire. We get grain bin fires like with corn or soybean, and they'll probably never fight a grain bin fire. A lot of our car fires, they're way out in rural communities, so our cars are really rolling by the time we get there versus theirs that might just kind of be on fire. We do a lot of single-family homes, that are separated from other houses, and they might deal with high-rise houses. They might deal with buildings that are almost touching, so they gotta separate and use a water wall to protect their exposures. So there's a variety of fires that we will do that they'll never do.
Our fires are, I wouldn't say different fires, but the way that we have to fight them compared to what they have to fight them is totally different. When they come in, they have, they're hooked up to a hydrant or they're hooked up to a water supply, where we have to be a little bit more strategic about, using our water wisely or not wasting it just for the fact that we have to haul our water to a rural fire, where we don't have the luxury of just flowing water or unlimited water source. We have to call a lot of neighbors and for mutual aid in order to get that water out there. I think that's one of the huge differences between what would be out here in the country and in the city.
Yeah, it's very versatile because, if you look at it, they're from all walks of life. We have butchers, we have mechanics, we have construction, we have some that are ex-military, some that were never military. We have some people on the ambulance as well. We have some people that don't want to touch people at all, and it just ranges. We have tall people, short people, we have women, we have men, and everyone has a part, everyone has a role, everyone has a spot, and it's just crazy to think that some of the best guys you got that love being on the roofs and love being on heights and stuff like that, because there's plenty of guys that would just as soon never go up more than 6 feet high. And everyone comes from a different walk of life, and they bring something different to the table, which is great, I think, especially in rural fire departments because of problem-solving skills needed, from vehicles rolled over to people pinned or buried, or snowmobile or ATV accidents where we know how they're put together, so we can go, oh, you and you snowmobile, how would you take the track off? Or, if somebody's arm was caught in it or something to that effect. I think the variety of people that we have, I think, makes us strong as a team.
We have a lot of fun. We've done a lot of stuff together. Our families hang out together. Our kids are friends. Another thing that we do as a fire department, we go play water ball, and we do that as and all the kids come, and it's a family event. Or we'll have a house burn or a training on a Saturday, and we'll all get together down here and grill hot dogs or burgers, and all the kids will come down. Or so, I guess it's not a job. That's one thing that's huge about it. It's definitely, it's different. Oh, it's definitely a bunch of friends. I mean, I didn't know any of these people when I got in the fire department. There was not one of them I knew except for Mike Holmquist at the time that I worked with, and I had only worked for him for a couple of years. But now everybody I go on vacation with, I go four-wheeling with, go snowmobiling with, hang out with, they're all people from the fire department. We just, we all hang out together. There's a lot of camaraderie between, and there's different, there's obviously different groups. You might have something going on, and certain people all get together, and certain other ones all get together, but we all really hang out together one way or the other.
Well, I think the closeness of everybody on the fire department is a little more real when you get on. There's always that camaraderie with the fire department. I think that's pretty universal. But I think coming here, there's definitely a closeness to everybody on that it's a little more real than when you get on and than looking from it from the outside.
Well, I think, the biggest thing is just not so much aware, but, 24 guys in just the different backgrounds. But, one thing that really stands out to me is how the different interests, different backgrounds, but I came in when we still had the phones, right at the end of the phones, before we went to the pagers. And just to see guys come together and work towards one result always stands out to me, which is pretty neat. So, and now it's changed. Kokato has more guys on the department than they did and I think it's been 3 years now that I retired. So, yeah. So the phones, they literally had a phone that a red light would come on, and then each house had those. And so you'd pick up the phone to answer the 911. So it did not go. I'm not positive on this, but I don't believe it went through a dispatch at that time. And like I said, I was at the very end of the telephones, and shortly after then, the pagers came in, and that was a big upgrade as far as just being able to get the page, and then have it to be able to repeat it down the road. So, and now that's even growing. So now it comes right through on your cell phone.
We have a really good group right now. We all get along, and there's some days where we don't, but we can brush it off and not hold grudges. So that's nice. But we all can kind of say what's on our mind, and no one gets offended by it.
I think that there could be a mind game to it. I mean, you have to, believe you're gonna be okay, and you have to have faith in the people you're with to know that they're there for you and they've got your back. So
I think the community is very supportive of our fire department. With the fire personnel, we were able to get a new station as well. But you definitely feel the support from the community.
I think the community has always supported the fire department. I talked about having guys in town. Employers have been very supportive, knowing that, hey, I could lose this guy for 2 whatever hours during the day, but I support them being on the fire department. So not only the community, but employers have been very supportive of the fire department.
I think that the community has been very supportive of us. We're thankful to be in the community we have. I mean, we're very fortunate to have our station and all the trucks that we have. We're very fortunate. I think that they are definitely supportive.
I think the community felt very positive about the fire department. We tried to, be present when we could at various town things. We always had an occasional fundraiser going on. I think people in the town were very positive and appreciated what we did. And there were times when, there'd been a house fire or whatever, and someone would bring some treats down to our meeting, and just say thank you. And that means a lot. That's a good thing, and you want to be there to help the community. And that's our mission.
I was fortunate to never be involved in a structure fire where a person had died. Now, I can't say that with auto accidents. And there's some of those that really stick out, where especially if you knew the person, where I know for me, you'd wake up 2 straight weeks in the night and see that person. Those are the areas that I think people probably don't understand on what guys go through and what it does to a person. And, I think during our meetings, we talk about those things to just kind of get them out in the open more. So those stick out more than anything. But biggest thing is just what stands out is that the camaraderie of the guys. I'll admit I don't miss the calls. I don't miss that pager going off at 2 a.m. But I do miss some meetings and that, and just being around the guys. And I think anybody would say that. That's probably the thing that stands out the most since I've been off. So
I think just seeing a parent of a person who was involved in an accident and seeing that happen in real life, it was kind of like, that and when it becomes when it becomes personal, it kind of hits a little harder. It's just, buildings are buildings and stuff can be replaced, but when real people are affected and you see the concern on a person or a parent or a loved one, it kind of makes it real, and it's not really, it's just kind of puts into perspective for you.
A lot of people like the idea of being a volunteer firefighter or a firefighter in general until it comes time to actually being one. The late nights and the calls that stick with you, good or bad, because there's both. And to know that it's a brotherhood. We're here, reach out if you're struggling or anything. I think there's plenty of us that are just old enough that shows a sign of weakness if you're struggling and you don't want to reach out. But I think that changing that stigma, saying, hey, if it's too much, say something, because, rule number 1, make sure your wife's okay with it. Talk to her first, because we're competing for the same thing. We're both competing for your time, and depending on the friends or bonds that you make here, we can easily snag your time more than she can. So just clear it with your significant other, because we truly are sharing you. So.
I used to say with fire prevention, I like doing fire prevention, and I thought, I got to get these, we always have to replace ourselves as firefighters. We're not going to do this forever. And that's why fire prevention is so important to me, because you see a lot of cities, they're struggling to find enough firefighters. And Kokato's been very fortunate to not have that problem. We're full up right now where we want to be, and we're not struggling, And to me, that's why fire and prevention's so good. You know, little kids always want to be firefighters, but then as they grow up, they kind of forget about it. And we need to keep showing them that, you know, it's fun and it also helps the community. And I said when I first started doing fire prevention, you know, I need to find my replacement. Well, about 2 years ago, I was talking to a couple of our new firefighters, and they said, yeah, I remember you doing fire prevention. And that's when it hit me how long I've actually been on the fire department, that there was kids that were in elementary school, kindergartners, first graders, second graders, that toured the fire station when I was giving that tour. So I guess I've been around a while. And the other day, I was telling my wife, Reed's been on the fire department longer than I've been alive. And he joined in the early 70s, and I was born in 74. And she said to me, well, is there anyone on now that wasn't alive when you joined? I said, well, I don't think so, but boy, we're getting close. So, yeah, I've been doing this for a long time, but I still enjoy it.
You know, we get family gatherings interrupted, and we do this because we're volunteering. We want to help the community, we want to help people. So we can lose out on the family time, which can be challenging and put stress on the family.
100 years from now, if someone says something about the Kokato Fire Department, I would like to hear them say they did a good job. They did it with the right heart, and they knew how to crawl in and put a fire out. And that's a high compliment. That's a high honor in my mind, that they did a good job. They did what was right.